Having been a huge fan of Brooks performance shoes over the past few years, in particular the Brooks HYPERION Tempo and the Max original version, it's been great to test out the new Brooks HYPERION Max 3. There's a lot to unpack in this shoe. So welcome back to another first impressions video, this time at the Brooks HYPERION Max 3. As I said in that intro, I've been a huge fan of Brooks performance shoes for a long period of time. Some have been a big hit, some have been a bit of a miss. We'll be going through all of that shortly. The HYPERION Max 3 certainly is a mixed bag. As with all first impressions videos, we'll be going through how I've tested them, give you guys a very quick technical overview, and then I'll dive into my thoughts on this shoe, having tested both previous versions of it. Quick disclaimer, this is a pair of shoes that Brooks have sent to me for the purpose of review. However, they have no editorial control over this video. They have no idea of my thoughts, and they certainly won't see or hear anything from me until you guys have seen it on here first. So how have I tested the shoe? Let's get straight into it. First of all, it was around an 18-minute easy run with 8 by 20 second strides. That was the first run I threw into this shoe, and then the second run was a slightly easier, smaller run, which is more of a recovery run after a long marathon session. So a couple of easy runs done in the shoe. I haven't yet put too much pace change in the shoe, more so from the fact that the original HYPERION Max was just an amazing do-it-all shoe. I did everything in that shoe. The changes they made to HYPERION Max 2, the future version, were huge. This kind of follows on from that, and I found that shoe to very much be pigeonholed in that area of a good, steady, long-run shoe, something you could stay in for a long period of time, get some good, easy and steady miles in it, but are a little bit too heavy for me to pick up the pace in. This has kind of followed suit. I don't particularly want to put too much pace change in, although I will say the strides in this shoe were absolutely phenomenal. However, the weight in it, with an increase again from version 2, has just made it a little bit more of an easy and steady day cruiser. Both runs felt great. I did feel it was a little bit softer on the second run than the first one, so whether it needs a little bit of breaking in, and we'll talk about that shortly with the dual density midsole that's going on here, plus the speed vault plate, I'm not entirely sure, but it certainly felt a little bit softer in that second run. Either way, it was very comfortable. One thing they've done really well is the upper, and we'll talk about that shortly, but the strides were really, really good, clocking easily into that sub 3 minute per K pace, feeling really good on them. It just glides. It's got a nice rocker geometry, so you really do feel like when you're moving through the stride, you're moving in it fast. But I think a stride is really all I want to take it for in terms of speed. But before we go through more thoughts on that, let's go through a very quick technical overview. True to size, as always in Brooks, UK size 13, got a classic thumb width at the end, which is what I want, so that's perfect, nothing different there. We're talking about a 6mm heel to toe drop. Stack heights vary online. There's a common theme of 45-39, 46-40. Either way, it's well over the legal stack height. So again, not legal to race in, especially if you're in that top end elite field. Brooks obviously have a racer for that, but I'm just making you aware of this. So it's in and around that area. And in my UK size 13, it comes in at a whopping 372 grams or 13.1 ounces. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head what the weight gain is from version 2 to 3, but I'll make sure I put that on screen as well. Now, weight necessarily isn't everything. I can find that some heavier shoes are really, really good. Some maybe not so much, and they just feel a bit heavy and clumpy. This one I feel is better than version 2, but we'll get more into that, as I said, shortly. Let's work our way from the back of the shoe, talk about the heel counter, ankle collar, tongue, lacing, upper, midsole, and finish with the outsole. So again, they don't specify what material this is. It kind of feels like an engineered mesh material, which runs all the way around the shoe, a little bit sturdier in the heel. You can see there we've got that classic heel cup that runs around there and down there. We've also got a little bit of stretchy fabric here to sit nicely under the ankle bones. We've got the classic bumper padding that we see in a lot of shoes just to add the comfort, but then we've got this extra section here. It's kind of like a booty style fit. The tongue is all part of the upper itself. There's a bit of plastic that's used either side of the laces to give the laces a bit of structure, but the tongue is a little bit stretchier than the rest of the material on here. So it's kind of like they've weaved different density and style fabrics into this upper. Tongue's very comfortable. It sits on top nicely. And I think what you sometimes can get with these type of shoes, especially when the tongue is all kind of knitted into one upper, is it can feel a little bit loose and sloppy. This doesn't, you'll be glad to hear. It does feel very comfortable on top, and the breathability in the shoe is really good. Something I've always found really good with Brooks is their uppers. Again, no issues there whatsoever. So that is all feeling really good around that ankle area. Laces, again, no issues whatsoever. Standard lacing system, standard laces. They do the job just fine. The tongue is not gusted because it's all part of the material in the upper, and that runs all the way around with a couple of overlays with the logos inside and outside of the shoe. Again, as I said, breathability is great, and overall I've got to say they've done a great job on the top half of the shoe. The bottom half is where we've got this dual density midsole setup. So we're seeing a flash of their DNA Gold here, which is their new PIBA based racing material. We're seeing that a lot in their racing shoes. That is then sandwiched in between, the plate, the Speedvolt plate is sandwiched between the top layer of that DNA Gold, and then I believe it's DNA Flash version 2 on the bottom to add a little bit more durability. So this stuff on the bottom is a little bit firmer. We're used to that type of midsole in previous versions of the shoe. The stuff on the top, the PIBA based midsole, is a little bit softer and squishier. Speedvolt board runs, as I said, through the shoe. You can see glimpses of it in some of these cutouts, and you can see it here in the medial cutout here as well. I will warn you, and I feel like people have also said this with the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0 as well, this can cause a little bit of instability. I was running pretty much on tarmac and very buffed out flat trails, but if you do encounter any kind of slightly off camber terrain, or the road's a little bit slanted left and right, it can feel like your ankle's rolling in a little bit, so you've just got to be careful there. Overall, it feels very stable, relatively wide platform, but again, I do question the need for the cutout of this shoe. If it's a weight saving thing, then I think they need to look at the whole shoe in general, and I did notice it on a couple of sections when the pavement was kind of a little bit all over the place. Otherwise, very good grip, as I'd expect with Brooks. Never had an issue with Brooks grip, and that covers the majority of the shoe. I think overall a very well built shoe, very bottom heavy. So with that out of the way, let's get into my first impressions of the shoe. So obviously I have very fond memories of the HYPERION Max version 1. That was a fantastic shoe. I tested the HYPERION as well. That was a much more lower stack shoe. Wasn't quite so keen on that one. Then we got the version 2 of both the shoes. Wasn't quite a fan of version 2 of the Brooks HYPERION Max. Again, it just became a little bit built up. What we went from, this is the version 2, what we went from is a shoe more like this, which is the HYPERION 2. I think it's a couple of mil stack less than the original HYPERION Max, but what they kind of did is took the HYPERION Max, moved that over into the HYPERION. So the version 2 of that is a really solid upgrade. Really enjoyed this, put well over 100 miles into this one. And then I also put over 100 miles into this one as well, but they made this kind of more of a longer distance cruising shoe. So obviously the shoe setup changed massively. Really good for those steady long runs, not so much for that all-round use, which I used to use a HYPERION Max for. Now what we're seeing in version 3 is an evolution of that again, and I think it's nice to get some of this DNA Gold in here. I did notice it, so what I found with the HYPERION Max 2, very good long distance cruiser, as will this be. However, it was a little bit on the firmer side. I am all for firm midsoles, but it wasn't particularly forgiving at all. There didn't seem to be too much about it. This has a little bit more about it, and it was showing when I was doing the strides. It gave a lot more back when I was really turning the legs over fast. So realistically, I probably should give a speed session a go in this shoe. It just feels a little bit bottom heavy. The upper is so sleek and nice and well fitting, and it's really good. There's just so much going on down in this bottom half of the shoe. And we mustn't forget the stack height has once again increased in this shoe from the previous version. So this is now bulking up even more, again, to provide that protective layer. I think for the longer marathon miles, this is going to be one of those shoes that is just a go-to for a lot of people. As I said, a little bit less of a all-rounder. Now, what we see in the HYPERION 3, which I haven't yet tested, is a couple mil more stack in that one, and again a very sleek non-plated design, which now pretty much ties in with what we used to see in the original HYPERION Max. So if you're looking for something like the original HYPERION Max, then all you need to do is look at the HYPERION version 3. What was also nice to feel in this shoe in the second run was it softening up a little bit more, so that was nice. I'm hoping that it gives a little bit more after that. I've heard some good stories from people that have put some good miles in this shoe and said that it really does start to open up, so I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and I'll keep putting a few more miles in it. I guess the question is, there's a lot of shoes appearing in this realm, and the question is, what sets this one apart from maybe say the Hoka Mach X3, Prime X version 3 potentially? I know that's carbon plated, it, but again, that overstacked training shoe. More recently, the Asics Sonic Blast. They're all that kind of illegal overstacked plastic plated or nylon plated or PEBA plated, whatever they are, kind of training shoe. And so with this one topping the scales on a relatively heavy end, you've got to ask yourself the question, why would you choose this one over the others? Now I know that might sound a little bit harsh, I'm not really meaning for it to, but you've just got to ask a few questions. For me as a runner, what I tend to like to run in my weekly rotation is either some old racing shoes for my sessions like my Adios Pro 3, which I'm using a lot now, or a non-plated option. Really been going for the Adios 9 for a lot of smaller workouts, and then maybe something like a HYPERION MAX where it's non-plated for some of the other stuff, and the easy recovery days or even the steady days, I'm again reaching for potentially a non-plated shoe. I like to save the plates for race day. But for me, something like this traditionally wouldn't normally get into my weekly routine. However, as I said, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I'll slip it in for a few more weeks and see if I can get a few more miles in it, see if it changes my mind, and really see if it grows on me. There's nothing wrong with this shoe at all. I just feel like I've got such good memories of the original HYPERION Max. It's just taking the shoe away, and I feel like the HYPERION is definitely going to be the shoe that I'm going to want to test. So I'm also now keen to try and pick up a pair of those. Overall, a very well built shoe from Brooks, very comfortable in the upper. Honestly, I give this upper a solid 9.5 out of 10. Very, very comfortable, really good, and I think they've done great things here, especially using that kind of like embedded tongue. It's so difficult to get that right, and they've done it really well. I think the midsole is just where things need to be fine-tuned a little bit, and I really hope that they work on that in version 4 and just try and shave a little bit of weight. In my UK size 13, if we can get it down to around that 340, 350 gram mark, it's just going to be a much more versatile shoe. I just feel like when it tops the scales in the 370s, for me, it really starts to pigeonhole itself in something like an easy and steady day option, and it's not something that I'm really going to want to reach for anything more than that. So those are my first thoughts on the Brooks HYPERION Max 3. A solid shoe. I question whether I need something like this in my rotation. I'd love to hear from you guys if you do too. Have you picked up this shoe? How many miles have you got in it? As I said, I've spoken to a few people already that have got this shoe and are really enjoying it, putting in a lot of marathon miles. It seems to be a perfect marathon companion. If that's you, please do drop a comment. It'd be great to hear from you down there. Otherwise, if you're keen on seeing other shoe reviews, check out this video up here where I've just recently reviewed the Asics Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. That video's just dropped, or if you want to see a bit of a comparison video on shoes, check out this one down here, and I'll see you guys over on one of those.